At the bottom of the sea, a coral reef is gripped by a mysterious force which is spraying dirt and debris everywhere. Nearby, young Randall takes his girlfriend Emily to his parents' beach house to spend the vacations together. As it's low season in the city and many locals aren't at home, the two of them can relax and enjoy the scenery at their leisure. After settling into the house, the couple enjoy a romantic moment and, hours later, Emily wakes up and goes to the bathroom. When she gets there, she is surprised to see several bottles of medicine and believes that someone else is in the house. To prove it, she goes into the living room, where she finds food in the fridge and an incomplete jigsaw puzzle on the table. Soon after, an unknown woman enters the house and, without realizing it, the young woman runs to warn her boyfriend. He goes with Emily to the living room and they meet the woman, who introduces herself as Jane and says she's known Randall since he was a child. Then her husband Mitch returns from the market and reveals that he is a friend of Randall's father, who has come to spend some time at their vacation home. The truth is that the young man hadn't told anyone about his trip and the couple had previously asked his father to stay at the beach house. The whole situation makes Emily uncomfortable and she thinks it would be better to go to a hotel. But Mitch insists that the two of them keep them company for the next few days. The young woman accepts, but soon after, she calls Randall to talk alone outside the house. Arriving on the balcony, Emily sees a strange animal on the stairs, which seems to have come from the sea. However, she just ignores it to go and talk to Randall and scolds him for not having told his father about the trip and for his strange attitudes over the last few months. As well as dropping out of college, Randall didn't answer her messages, leading Emily to believe that the relationship had come to an end. The young man apologized for his behavior and said that the reason for his trip to the beach house was to reconcile with his girlfriend. On hearing this, Emily decides to give Randall a second chance and agrees to stay at the place with the other guests. When evening comes, the two couples meet at the table for dinner and, in the middle of their conversation, Mitch hands Randall a sea oyster. The young man agrees to try it, but soon regrets it because of the strange taste. Nevertheless, the meal continues and the couple take the opportunity to ask what Emily and Randall are studying at the moment. The young woman says she joined the organic chemistry course because she is fascinated by the origin and evolution of life on the planet, especially in the marine environment. As for Randall, he reveals that he dropped out of college because he hadn't discovered his vocation and that he's taking some time to think about it. Jane is moved by this response, saying that unlike her, Randall is young and still has time to decide what to do with his life. It is then revealed that the medicines in the bathroom cabinet belong to her and that Jane suffers from a terminal illness, with only a few days left to live. The atmosphere at the table becomes uncomfortable with this information, so Randall tries to break the ice by bringing another bottle of booze. What's more, he shows them something he brought back hidden on his trip, a substance that causes hallucinations. Emily thinks it's a bad idea, but Mitch and Jane readily agree to try the stuff. While they wait for the substance to take effect, Emily tells them more about her interest in marine life, saying that there are unknown beings in the depths of the sea. What's more, unlike humans, they are able to survive in extreme situations and adapt to major environmental changes. In order to understand more about marine life, Emily wants to become a professional diver and get a license to do field research. The conversation continues and Mitch goes to wash his hands in the sink when he feels something unusual in the water. It's as if the liquid is changing its composition to the point where he feels the water is soft. Minutes pass and the substance begins to take effect, with Emily falling asleep soon after. When she wakes up, she finds herself alone in the living room and realizes that the three of them have gone outside to admire the scenery. Suddenly, they notice a fog around the place, which seems to have come from the sea. Along with this, the plants begin to emit an unusual light and Emily explains that in the middle of the fog, there must be microbes that cause this reaction when they touch the leaves of the trees. Jane insists on taking a closer look, as this could be her last chance to appreciate this phenomenon of nature. While she's getting ready, Emily and Mitch are chatting on the balcony until they smell a foul odor from outside, as if it were coming from a sewer. At the same time, Jane goes off by herself to look at the trees, which worries Mitch because of her health. He sets off to find his wife who, on approaching the leaves, sees a sticky substance emitting a blue light. Soon afterwards, the fog begins to thicken and Jane starts coughing, as if she were suffocating. Frightened, she screams for her husband, who runs to find her, while Emily goes to call Randall to help them, but the man ends up dozing off on the living room floor. She then decides to go to Mitch's alone, but the fog begins to take over the place and leaves Emily dazed. With her vision becoming blurred and feeling deeply asleep, the young woman ends up fainting and wakes up in the living room minutes later, with all the lights in the house switched off. Confused, she sees that Randall is still asleep and hears Jane's voice, coughing in the bathroom. Emily climbs the stairs to see if the couple need help, but Mitch, who appears through the crack in the door, just locks himself and his wife in the bathroom, indicating that her condition is more serious than expected. Unable to do anything, Emily calls Randall into her room, but before she can turn off the lamp, she notices by the light that the fog has brought the microorganisms into the house. Even so, she falls asleep and begins to have strange dreams in which she sees the sea churning and forming small waves. These visions make her wake up suddenly, still feeling a bit dizzy and with a strange taste in her mouth. Emily suspects that the substance she ingested may have had some effect on all of them, but Randall assures her that there was nothing too much in the product and that they must have felt ill for another reason. The young man believes that his girlfriend is becoming paranoid and tells them both to go to the beach and relax on the sand. Emily agrees to the idea, but before she leaves, she finds Jane sitting at the living room table with several open bottles of medicine beside her. When she tries to speak to her, the woman doesn't answer and the skin on her face looks dry, as if she's had a heat stroke. Emily insists and asks where Mitch is, but on hearing her husband's name, Jane suddenly gets up and, with great effort, climbs the stairs leaning on the banister. Randall finds this strange and asks what happened, but Jane again remains silent and goes straight to her room. Seeing her situation and without Mitch around, the couple decide to look for him on the beach, but there's no sign of him anywhere. So the two decide to wait for Mitch and lie down on the sand to enjoy the sunny day. However, Randall feels something strange in his stomach and, believing it's because of the oyster he's eaten, he rushes to the bathroom. His girlfriend asks if everything is all right, but Randall tells her not to worry and runs back home. When he gets there, he goes to wash his hands at the tap, but it starts pouring dirty water, containing a dark, unknown substance. After leaving the bathroom, the young man hears heavy footsteps coming from the second floor and goes upstairs to see if Mitch is in the room. Meanwhile, Emily continues to sunbathe on the beach when she is startled to see that Mitch is sitting next to her. Before she could ask him where he was, he said he was worried about his wife's condition, which had worsened over the last few days. Despite this, he decided to go to the beach house as he wanted to give Jane as much joy as possible before being forced to say goodbye to her. Emily is moved by Mitch's feelings and asks how Jane is, as she seemed to have taken a turn for the worse the night before. But instead of answering, the guy just says he's going for a swim and then he takes off his shirt and walks towards the sea. However, even after entering the water, Mitch continues walking until he reaches the deepest part of the sea. This worries Emily and she shouts for him to come back, but Mitch ignores her until he finally disappears into the middle of the sea. Fearing that he has drowned, Emily considers going into the water, but to her horror, she steps on a sea creature, which appears to be a huge jellyfish. In a few seconds, the whole beach is infested with them, and because she has accidentally stepped on them, her skin is burnt and a sea worm gets under her foot. At the same moment, Randall is heading towards the bedroom when he hears Jane making strange sounds. The young man knocks on the door and asks if she's all right, but the woman doesn't answer, so he decides to go in anyway. Before he knows it, his girlfriend's foot is badly injured and she can't even walk. Because of this, Emily is forced to drag herself back home and, with a lot of effort, manages to get there, but doesn't find Randall or Jane around. To make matters worse, the wound on her foot is getting worse and the sea worm is burrowing deeper into her skin. Terrified by this situation, she searches the cupboard for medicine and finds a bottle of distilled vinegar. Without hesitation, she pours the liquid under her foot and screams because of the intense pain. Emily then grabs a knife and a pair of scissors and pulls the worm out of her foot before she is forced to remove it completely. After that, Emily grabs the first aid kit, makes a makeshift bandage to close the wound, and goes to the bedroom to change. At that moment, she sees Randall dragging himself down the corridor as if he were running away from someone and putting out a white goo. Emily runs up to her boyfriend and asks what's wrong, but before Randall can answer, Jane appears dragging herself out of the room. The woman appears with darker skin and white eyes, as if she were some kind of zombie. Unable to control her actions, Jane advances towards the couple and Emily is forced to lift Randall and carry him to the exit. As soon as they get through the door, the young woman uses a hose to block the handle, but Jane manages to get through the glass and continues to crawl towards them. The two then run to a neighboring house and ask for help, but the place is locked and no one is around. Emily tries to understand what is going on and Randall believes that the oyster he ate may have something to do with it. Suddenly, another guy appears, showing the same symptoms as Jane and unable to get up. Once again, the couple are forced to flee and they run towards the road, but the fog gets thicker and thicker, hindering their vision. After a long walk until nightfall, the couple see the siren lights of a pickup truck. Emily leaves Randall for a moment and gets into the vehicle, where she tries to talk to someone on the radio, informing them of her location and asking for help. Shortly afterwards, an unknown man answers the call and tells her to hide in the house, sealing all the doors and windows. The young woman asks if this has to do with the fog around the city, but the guy tells her that it's not fog, but something much worse. Before he can give any more answers, the radio contact is jammed and Emily runs to get Randall, who is getting weaker and weaker. She once again carries him towards a house to hide inside, but this time the young woman also begins to feel ill. Despite this, she gathers the rest of her strength and, using a log of wood, Emily breaks the glass in the window and enters the house with Randall. Apparently the place is empty and she leaves her boyfriend into the living room, closing the bedroom door soon after. Inside, Randall sees a phone and tries to call for help, but the line has been cut. Emily helps him lean on the wall and goes to see if there's any water in the tap, but instead, a white goo starts coming out, similar to the one Randall and Jane were pouring out hours before. Emily begins to suspect that the whole problem originated in the sea and that the contamination may already have spread all over the world. Fortunately, she finds bottles of drinking water in the room and gives Randall some to make him feel better. However, his condition is getting worse and he feels as if something is moving inside his stomach. He asks his girlfriend to turn on the television and see if the news can explain what has happened, but all the channels only show an emergency alert message. Next to the TV, the young woman finds a radio and tries to tune into a channel, but to no avail. She then sets it to an AM transmission and manages to pick up a message from an expert from the local Oceanography Institute. As Emily suspected, the origin of everything came from the sea, more precisely from deep water. The message says that an unknown species of microbe was preserved in the rocks and spread not only to the sea, but also to other marine beings such as fish and oysters. In addition, global warming has caused the deep waters to bubble up into the sea, dispersing the microbes in their bacterial form. Eventually, the bacteria reached the surface and spread rapidly in the air, resulting in a fog made up of thousands of these microorganisms. Now that she knows the cause of all this, Emily says that the best thing to do is to stay at home and wait for help, avoiding further contact with the bacteria. Randall, however, believes that he won't survive until then and will soon become infected, just like Jane. Afraid that these will be his final moments, he apologizes to Emily for his mistakes and for the time he has wasted away from her. The young woman gets emotional, but asks her boyfriend not to give up because she will find a way to survive this. Randall agrees and Emily goes off to explore the house, looking for useful objects so that they can survive as long as possible. Searching through the cupboards, she finds some adhesive tape and uses it to cover all the gaps in the doors and windows. The young woman continues to look for more places to seal, when she sees a door in the hallway that leads to the basement of the house. Once there, Emily finds 2 tanks full of oxygen, attached to a respirator used for diving. Thanks to this, she and Randall will be able to hold out for longer, breathing pure oxygen and avoiding further contact with the microbes in the air. However, Randall's situation is becoming more critical and he begins to put out the same white goo as before. After that, he sees that a strange, parasite-like creature has emerged from inside his stomach. Shortly afterwards, Randall falls to the ground and his vision begins to blur, until the infection is complete and his eyes turn white, just like Jane's. Meanwhile, Emily is finishing collecting the oxygen cylinders and rushes off to help her boyfriend. However, in the darkness of the basement, she hears strange sounds and realizes that she is not alone. When she turns on the light, she finds a lifeless man spewing white goo all over his body. Not only that, but from inside its belly, a huge parasitic creature emerged with a skeletal face similar to that of a human. Apparently, bacteria, when they come into contact with a host, develop inside it, creating a completely new and grotesque being. This terrifying sight leaves Emily in shock and she rushes to escape, locking the basement from the outside. Afterwards, she goes to find Randall to tell him what she saw in the basement, but she finds him crouching next to the television, making strange sounds. Unfortunately, Randall is already overwhelmed by the marine bacteria infection and begins to crawl towards Emily. Faced with her companion's inevitable fate, the young woman cries as she realizes that it's too late and there's no saving him. With no other choice, as soon as Randall gets close, Emily attacks him with the oxygen cylinder. Even so, Randall continues to advance and, to put him out of his misery once and for all, she strikes him once more on the head, eliminating him for good. Now, with no hope that she will survive, Emily cries next to Randall's body and waits for the end. Then, on the floor next to the cupboard, she finds her car keys and sets off the alarm to locate it. With her oxygen cylinder in hand, she puts on her respirator and sets off down the road. On the way, Emily comes across a complete infestation of bacteria throughout the city, completely obstructing her vision. Because of this, the young woman is unable to drive the car and, without having time to react, ends up crashing into a tree and falling unconscious. Minutes later, Emily wakes up without her respirator and with a severe cough due to her contact with the marine bacteria. The young woman tries to pull out the cylinder to breathe, but it gets stuck in the wreckage of the vehicle and she is forced to get out. Unable to breathe properly, Emily drags herself along the ground and ends up in a puddle of water. Feeling weak and with blurred vision, the young woman just lies down on the ground and starts hallucinating the sea again. It's as if, somehow, the infection has created a connection with the water, almost as if she is gradually becoming part of it. Hours pass and, when dawn breaks, Emily finds herself in the middle of the beach, her eyes white, just like the other infected. However, she still retains a shred of consciousness and, accepting her fate, she tells herself not to be afraid of what will happen. Then, as the tide rose higher and higher, Emily was hit by the water and her body was absorbed into the sea. Tragically, the young woman was a victim of the force of nature which, faced with climate change caused by human beings, began a silent revenge. Through the microbes that lived in the depths, the extinction of the human species began. Everything indicates that, by our own actions, humans will give way to new and better adapted beings that will soon populate planet Earth. So what did you think of this movie? Leave it in the comments below. And if you liked the video, like and subscribe for more movie recaps. See you next time.